In progress.
Okay, we're up to Daf Mem Aleph, Amud Aleph, the beginning of the second parak of Kiddushin. My WhatsApps are going nuts. Okay, the Mishnah says like this: Ish mekadesh boya b'shluchai. A man can mekadesh an isha either by himself or send a shliach to mekadesh an isha. A isha miskadeshes boya b'shluchai, and a woman can accept Kiddushin either by herself or through a shliach. Okay, so far it's pretty pashit. Ha'ish mekadesh is bita kishi naira boya b'shluchai. A man can give over his daughter to get married when she's a naira, either by personally or he could appoint a shliach to marry off his daughter. Now, what's interesting, and the Gemara is going to point this out, a naira is from 12 to 12 and a half. We know that after 12 and a half, the father cannot marry off his daughter. The Mishnah says he can marry her off when he's from 12 to 12 and a half, which implies that up to 12 he can't. That's not true. He could be mekadesh. He can marry off his daughter. Kavachomer, if you can marry her off from 12 to 12 and a half, Kavachomer, you can marry her off when she's a katana. So the Gemara is going to try to figure out exactly why the Mishnah picked the lashon of naira as opposed to a katana. Hold on one second.
Recording stopped. Gress.
Okay, so let's start the Gemara. So the Gemara is a kasha. Hasha b'shlucha mekadesh boy mi boy. The question is, if the Mishnah says that a man can be mekadesh an isha through a shliach, kavachomer, he can mekadesh himself. Anything you can do shliach, definitely you can do yourself. So why does the Mishnah have to say that he can mekadesh an isha when he could do it through a shliach? So I'm Rav Yosef mitzvah by Yosef v'shluchai. The point of the Mishnah is you could do it or your shliach can do it, but it's better for you to do it because it's a mitzvah. Anytime you have a mitzvah, do it yourself as opposed to sending it through a shliach. Ki hadar Rav Safra machach reisha. Like Rav Safra, he would personally singe. They would eat goat heads, part of the Shabbos meal, and you wanted to not look disgusting, so they would singe the hair off, and he would do it himself. He would personally do it himself. So the point is, mitzvah yosem b'shluchai. Rava malach shibuta, Rava would salt the fish for Shabbos. So any mitzvah yosem b'shluchai. Ikadami some have a different version. Then no, it's not mitzvah. Mitzvah yosem b'shluchai means that you could do it, or your shliach can do it, but it's better for you. No, ikadami some say, isur nami ispa. It's actually usur to appoint a shliach to mekadesh an isha. Why? Because then you're going to marry a woman without seeing her. Even chassidim who have arranged marriages meet them once. Why? He says, it's also for a man to mekadesh isha until he sees her. Why? Because if you send the shliach to marry her, now you're already married, then you meet her and you don't find her attractive. Tizgana love, you're going to find her repulsive, and you're going to have a very unhealthy marriage, and she's going to be ridiculed, and that's not fair to her. So according to this version, it's actually usher for a man to mekadesh an isha without seeing her. And according to this version, how do you interpret Rav Yosef's statement, which is mitzvah ba yosem b'shlucha, which means you could do it, but it's better through. Your shliach can do it better through you. What do you mean it's better through you? I thought it's also through a shliach. So you have two statements. We just said it's also, and then you have Rav Yosef's statement that no, it's fine. It's just not as preferred. Is it also not as preferred? So the answer is aseifa itmar. Rav Yosef's statement was talking about a woman, meaning a man is also for him to mekadesh an isha without meeting her through a shliach. But a woman could appoint a shliach to mekabel it because there's a concept called tad l'meisa tandu meisa v'armelu, which means that women want to get married more than men, and therefore a woman will be fine. She'll be happy. It's not as preferred because it's a mitzvah for her to do it herself, but at the end of the day, it's still that's where it's effective. Where it's usher is for a man. But there's no isser for a woman to appoint a shliach. As Rish Lakish says, a woman would rather get married than to live alone. Okay, fine. Now here's the Gemara just has one quick point before we address the main topic of the daf. The Mishnah said that a man can marry off his daughter when she's a naira. What do you mean? It applies when she's a naira only when she's 12 to 12 and a half, but not under 12. Of course under 12. Kishin and Kishan loy. So why is it that you can't marry her off when she's under 12? The answer is Mesayele l'Rab. Dam Rabbi the Rav. Item Rav Elazar. Also Adam Shekadesh Isa Bita Kashiktana Ach Tigdal B'Tayim Plani Ani Reitza. The halacha is, of course, he has the power to marry her off before 12, but it's also to do that because you're not allowed to marry off a woman, a girl under the age of bat mitzvah, because she's not mature enough. So therefore, you have to wait. The father has to wait for her to become bat mitzvah, and then she'll be old enough and mature enough to say, I want to marry this person. But until the bat mitzvah, it's taka asur. So when the Mishnah says you can marry off after bat mitzvah, it means before bat mitzvah, although you have the power, it's asur to do this. Okay. So now from here into the end of the daf, the Gemara is going to be dealing with finding sources for shlichus in halacha. How do you know that you could appoint a shliach? Right? Shlichus min Allah. How do you know you can appoint a shliach? Let's say in our case, Kiddushin. How do you know that shlichus works? So the Tanya, the pasuk says regarding divorce, v'shilach. It's actually the v'shilcha. Instead of saying divorce of gerushin, it's v'shilcha, send her away. Shalach is a lashon shlichus. V'shilach. The fact that the Torah used the verbiage of v'shilach tells you that shlichus is an option for divorce. Okay. Now, why does it say an extra hey? V'shilcha. The extra hey tells you malamid she oisa shliach. Not only that he could have divorced her through a shliach, she could appoint a shliach to mekabel the divorce. Now, v'shilach v'shilcha, it says the word v'shilcha a second time. Malamid shliach oisa shliach. That tells you that a shliach can appoint a shliach. That if you appoint a shliach to mekadesh shanisha, that shliach can appoint another shliach. Okay, so that we have a source for shlichus by gerushin, eshkechin, gerushin, kedushin, and all. And how do I know that it applies to kedushin? You'll say, okay, well, why can't we just assume that it's the same? Not through a special gzerish shava, just if it works by gerushin, logically it would work by kedushin. The answer is logically is no good. Why? Gerushin, maybe it works that you could appoint a shliach because you could divorce her against her will. So maybe, because you could divorce her against her will, maybe you could also send it through a shliach. Maybe it's easy to affect it. But kedushin, which is not against the will, maybe not. So therefore, you can't just be logic. It has to be a drasha connecting the two. You see, once you have a hekish, once you have a hekish connecting them, then, once you have a hekish or gzeir shava, then you can't ask kashas. If it's logical, then the logic stops. The Gemara says, the pasuk says she gets divorced and she gets married in the same pasuk. There's a hekish connecting divorce to marriage. Just like divorce, you can appoint a shliach, so to kedushin you can appoint a shliach. So that's the source. So we learn our kedushin from divorce. Okay. Another concept of shlichus, we have to find the source, and that's by truma. The Mishnah says, a man says to a shliach, go separate truma for me. So truma, what's the measurements for truma? It's either 1/40th, 1/50th, or 1/60th. If you're generous, it's a 40th. If you're stingy, it's a 60th, and the average person is a 50th. So you appoint a shliach to separate truma. How much? What does he take off? He forgot to ask you: are you a 40 guy, a 50 guy, or a 60 guy? So toirim kedas balabayis. So the agent separates truma based on the guy. If the guy is a stingy guy, go a 60th. If the guy's a generous guy, go a 40th. Toirim beinis. Let's say he doesn't know the guy well. So go with a 50th, which is the average. Go to the next page. Let's say he took too little. He took too much. He was off. The guy really was a stingy guy, 60th, but he gave a 50th. Or the guy is generous and he gave too little. Whatever it is, it's still effective. So what do you see from this Mishnah? At the end of the day, you see that shlichus works by truma. Minol, and what's the source? Well, we learned our kedushin from gerushin, so maybe learn truma from gerushin as well. Truma from gerushin as well. Yeah, but truma is considered holy as compared to truma is not the holiest thing. The holiest thing is kachim, but truma is holier than gerushin. So maybe shlichus does not work by something that's holy. So Amar Kro Atem. The pasuk says by truma Atem. Gam atem. It says it could have said atem, but it says gam atem. The extra gam is l'rab as a shliach. Gam means inclusive. It's inclusive of a shliach. Okay, so we have a source for truma. We have a source for gerushin. So why not just have truma and I'll learn now gittin and kedushin from truma? Truma is different. Truma is effective even by thought, right? I don't actually have to take the amount and separate it to make it truma. I just think it works. Doesn't work like that by Gittin and Kiddushin. So the fact that Shlichus works by Truma, maybe it works because Truma is effective in thought alone. So I wouldn't be able to compare it to Gittin and Kiddushin. Okay, so we have a source for Truma, we have a source for Gittin. But it's not a third one. The Mishnah says, Chabura Shavet Pischa. This is the concept of Shlichus by Kodshim, by Karbanos. So let's say, the Karban Pesach, you have to have a group of the people of the Karban Pesach. So what happens is, they lost their Karban Pesach. The animal ran away. So they tell to one of them, they tell one of the member of the group, Tseyu Bakish, you run after the animal. And if you find it, shecht it for us. Okay. So he found it and he shechted it. Now that Mishnah specifically, that's the main point. The main point is that there's shlichus by shchita. But that happens to be that Mishnah is dealing with the following scenario. While he was looking for it, they decided they're not gonna wait for him, and they brought their own carbon. So the question is, are they whose carbon do they eat from? Whose Pesach do they eat from? Do they eat from the guy who found it? That was the original, or do they go with the one that they just brought? So the answer is, it just depends on which came first. If the one that was lost, that single guy who was running after it, he found it and he shechted it before they shechted the replacement, then they all eat that carbon Pesach because by the time the replacement was brought, they had already had their mitzvah fulfilled. What do you see from this? See, there's shlichus, minol, what's the source? So you have truma and Kiddushin, and now you have carbon Pesach. So the chitem yalef mehanach. So you say, well, let's learn out shchita by karbanis, that it works by a shliach, from truma and Kiddushin. The answer is it can't be. You can't learn out. Even truma is considered not holy compared to kachim. So you don't have a source that shlichus works by kachim. So what's the source that shlichus works? So nafkalim either of Yeshua and Karcha. The answer is, regarding karbanis, we learn that from Yeshua and Karcha. Yeshua and Karcha says, how do I know they call it terakula? A person shliach, an agent could represent someone. Shenemar, v'shachtu oisoi kol kaladas yisrael ben arbaim. The pasuk says, v'shachtu oisoi kol kaladas yisrael ben arbaim, and the entire congregation of the Jewish people shechted it in the afternoon. What do you mean? Everyone shechted one carbon. There's only one person shechting. It means one person shechted on behalf of all of Klal Yisrael. So it's keilu. So this is the source that shlichus works. So you have truma, Kiddushin, and kachim. So the Gemara says, why do you need all three? Just let the pasuk write it by kachim, and I'll learn out truma and divorce from kachim. The answer is mishum dekel lemifrach malakachim shkein roiv masena de shliach. Kachim is different. I'll tell you why. The majority of kachim is going to be through shlichus, right? Maybe shlichus is generally something Hashem is not a fan of. Maybe it's something that Hashem is generally frowned upon. So why does it work by kachim? Because you need shlichus. It's part of the system. Think about it. I'm not a kohen, right? The kohen is a shliach. So you need shlichus. By definition, most karbanas are not brought by the owners. So maybe kachim is different. Maybe in general shlichus would not work, and kachim is different because roiv masayim aydei shlichus. The majority of actions are through shlichus. So we can't learn everything out from kachim. So the question, okay, maybe learn out two from the other one, two from three. Chadim echad le'aisi, teisi chadim etarti. Learn one out from the other two. Right? Which one? Hi teisi. Lo nichtar achon kachim. Don't write it by kachim. Learn kachim out from a combination of divorce and truma. The answer is, we said this before. It's different. They're both not considered holy compared to kachim, so it's not going to work. Okay. Fine. So don't write Kiddushin. I'll learn out Kiddushin from kachim and truma. The difference is kachim and truma both are affected by mind. Meaning, by truma, if I just say that's truma in my mind, it works. If I say that animal is a carbon, it works. So maybe that's why shlichus works as opposed to Kiddushin, which you need an action. Okay, but why do you need it to be written by truma? Learn it out from kachim and Kiddushin. The answer is hachanami. You're right. You actually could. Good point. We no longer need a source for shlichus by truma. So, ela'atem gamatem lamali. So what do we do with gamatem if we now know shlichus by truma, that it's learned out from a combination of kachim and Kiddushin? Then what do you do with gamatem? We use gamatem for the teaching of Rav Yanai. Dam Rav Yanai, gamatem, matem b'nei bris, ashul chacham b'nei bris. We know gamatem doesn't tell you that shlichus works. Gamatem tells you that the shluchim have to be Jewish. Ma'atem b'nei bris, ashul chacham b'nei bris. Okay? So Gemara says, so basically, gamatem tells you that you cannot send a guy to separate truma because he's not chayiv. He's not a Jew who's chayiv in truma. Wait a minute, what do you need a pasuk for? So you tell me the whole pasuk is to tell me that goyim can't be shluchim because they're not mitzvah. I already know this. I know that from Rechi Barab Rav Yechanan. Dam Rechi Barab Rav Yechanan. Eina Evan Nasa Shadachakabel get miad by l'shalisha. Rav Yechanan said you cannot appoint a non-Jewish slave to receive a get for the wife. Why? B'shein b'tar is getting a Kiddushin because he's not in the parsha of getting a Kiddushin. So if I know that, then Mistama I also know that a guy cannot separate truma. The answer is it's different. So you might think Eved Delav Bar Heteru Klal. I might think that you could appoint a shliach who's a guy to separate truma. Why? Because while goyim are not obligated to separate truma, if they do separate truma of their own produce, it works. Meaning, if a guy, let's say, decides, I want to separate truma for a kohen, and he separates it, the halacha is that truma belongs to the kohen, and if someone else eats it, it'll be like eating truma, which is that you have to replace it and add a penalty of a fifth. So the point is, you might think that because goyim are bechlal the parsha somewhat, they're not mitzvah, but if they do separate truma, it works. So you might think that they could be a shliach. Kamash one gamatem, they cannot be. The Tanakh in the Mishnah says, truma, ema shliach nami avdi. So you might think they could actually appoint a shliach. Kamash malan. Oh, so you tell me the reason why you need gamatem is to tell you that a guy cannot be a shliach to separate truma. Why would I think they could? Because they could separate their own truma. So you might think they could be a shliach. Now, that's Rav Yechanan's opinion. Ula Rav Shimon the Potter. Rav Shimon disagrees. Rav Shimon holds that when a guy separates truma, not Rav Yechanan, it's the Mishnah's opinion. Rav Shimon disagrees with the Mishnah. He feels that when a guy separates truma of his own crops, it does not work at all. It's not truma. And if you eat it, you don't have to add a fifth, because it's not truma. So according to him, goyim are b'chalal not in the parish of truma. So what do you need gamatem for? The Tanan truma savichav midamas. If you have truma separated by a guy, the Tanakama feels that it is truma, and if it gets mixed into non-truma produce, it makes the mixture aser. And if a non-kohen eats the truma, you have to pay back a fifth, like any time you eat truma. Rav Shimon disagrees. So according to Rav Shimon, goyim are b'chalal not in the parsha of truma b'chalal. So atem gamatem lamli. So what do you do with gamatem? So it's needed. So you might think hayol b'mar atem v'lei arisin. Atem v'lei shutvim, atem v'lei apotropis, atem v'lei atar mishen shaloi. The Brisa teaches that if you separate truma, it is not effective if you're not the owner of it and you are not appointed. So let's say there's pretty extreme cases. One case is I just go into your field and I separate it without asking you. It doesn't work. Then you go apotropis. Apotropis means I'm appointed by the courts. So you might think that I have the right to do it. Doesn't work. And an aris. An aris means that I'm a sharecropper, which means I work the field and I get a percentage. So you might think that I'm like the owner. Kamashma, no. So you might think that because if you're not the owner, you can't do it. So you might think that a shliach doesn't work. Kamash malan. Meaning, the answer is, I'm stopping with this. But basically, the answer is like this. We already know that shlichus works by truma because it's learned out from gerushin and from kodshim. So the question is, what do you need amatem gamatem? The answer is, the reason we need it a second time is because you might think, because there's a special halacha by truma, that if you're not the owner, it doesn't work. So you might think that you mamish have to be the owner and the shlichus doesn't work. Kamash Mula, no. Atem Gamatem tells you that shlichus works. You need two drashas. One to tell you that shlichus works in general. The second one is to tell you, don't let me think that it doesn't work because Atem V'loi Apotropis. No, Kamash Mula, that you could do it if you're a shliach. I will stop here. Pick it up on Sunday.